like around 2 months after the bivalent booster shot became available. And so we're going to dive a little bit into what were some of those reasons that people decided to either not take the booster shot or postpone taking it. Okay. So yes, after the bivalent booster shot became available, researchers had noticed that very few eligible adults had actually gone ahead and taken the vaccine. So like I said, about 2 months afterwards, they decided to conduct a survey just to kind of assess the reasons for why people were receiving it or not receiving it. But today we're going to focus on looking into the reasons that people were hesitant around this vaccine. And we hope that some of this will be helpful in helping you guide your messaging and activities around vaccine hesitancy. So, before we'll go into the results, I just want to point out what were some of those eligibility requirements to get the survey, because as you think about these results, you may want to think about how this relates to your community. However, there wasn't an eligibility to take this survey, so they were surveying people within a very specific segment of the population, and that was people who were 18 or older, fluent in English, US residents, and people obviously who had already completed like the initial vaccine series. Really highlighting for you the fact that it was limited to people who are fluent in English, US residents, because I know many of you work with populations who might not meet that requirement. And a little bit about how they got that hesitancy data is that for those they asked people if they had gotten the bivalent booster shot, and for those who responded no, they were then given 10 different answer choices why they had not taken the shot, and there was an other write-in option, but the researchers really didn't analyze that data. They didn't find it that useful. So, they conducted their survey. And so a little bit about the demographics of the people that responded to the survey. And again, I just think it's really good to highlight this before you guys look into the results, just to think about how you may or may not be able to generalize this to your communities. So 95% of those people that responded had received 2 or more vaccine doses, meaning many of them had already gotten a booster shot before. They did manage to get an equal number of adults in different age buckets between 18 to 39, 40 to 59, and those who are 60 or more. However, about 2/3 of the respondents identified as white, and the respondents, the racial groups of those who responded to this was not proportional to national level, so a little harder to generalize to the different racial groups that you may be working with, just because it wasn't necessarily representative. And also, not the respondents did not give specific information whether they lived in urban or rural areas, so kind of hard to draw conclusions about how people are feeling around the bivalent booster when they live in specific geographic areas. So the survey results is that they got 1,200 people to respond. About 1/3 of those people did get the bivalent booster. And again, this is survey response that they've gotten about 2 months after the booster shot became available. So this is not the current data as of today, right? But about 63% had not yet gotten the boosters. And of those 759 who had not yet gotten the booster, however, 56% of them did say that they plan on doing so. But there was 1/4 of those who had not gotten it who had absolutely no plans on getting that booster shot. And if we look a little bit into the race and ethnicity of those who responded to the survey, I think it's kind of good to point out, for instance, that the percentages of those who were Black or African American, or those who identified as Hispanic or Latino, do not really reflect the national levels. For instance, Latinos represent about 19% of the U.S. populations, but only 7 of them responded to this survey. So, just a caveat there. And I also found it really interesting that across most of these racial groups, except for Alaska Native or Native Americans, we can see that across the board, it seems about a third, like 30% or a third of them had gotten the boosters, and about 2/3 had not, except for those who identified as Black or African American, where the numbers of those who did not get the booster was slightly higher. About 7 in 10 Black respondents had not yet gotten the bivalent booster. So these were, the cited reasons that were collected from the survey. At the top of it, we can see that many of the people who had not gotten it were simply just not aware that they were eligible or aware that it was even available. And I have to say that, like, when the booster shots first became available, I felt like the messaging around it was a little lacking, because I too was not immediately available knowledgeable of when it became available. And then at the bottom, the responses that were least cited were people being unsure whether this vaccine was safe, and people being unsure whether vaccines in general were effective. And that kind of makes sense, given that the population who was surveyed were people who had already gotten the COVID-19 series. So it's not necessarily that surprising. So the researchers thought it would be interesting to kind of group these responses. So for instance, we can group those people who did not get the shot, not because they were concerned or uncomfortable, but it's simply just they were not aware of them. They also grouped people who were having some concerns or uncertainty around this vaccine. And lastly, they grouped those who did not get the vaccination because they felt like they still had immunity against it, or they were not at high risk of getting a severe case of COVID. And then I created a last group, the group that sort of indicated that they either did not have time off from work to do this, to take the vaccine, or it was too much effort. And I thought that was also an important group to note. So looking at the groupings of hesitancy reasons, we can see that lack of awareness. When I looked at the data and I looked at how many people responded either as unaware of eligibility or unaware of it being available, that constituted about 35% of respondents who were simply just not aware, and an unawareness of eligibility was the overall most cited reason for why people had not gotten this vaccine. The second group that the researchers thought it was good to kind of lump together is people who just had this perceived immunity against COVID at that time, and that constituted 31% of the population. What I thought was really interesting is that, and I didn't realize this number would be so big, is that 33% of respondents had either mentioned some concerns or uncertainty around the bivalent booster shot. And I just thought that was really interesting, because these are people who have already gotten some COVID-19 vaccinations, and yet 33% were either uncertain or concerned about it. So that was, that was something that really stood out to me. And about 20% of them, just find that because of work or, ease of maybe not being able to get it, that was the reason why. So the researchers provided a little bit more context as to some of these respondents by their groups, and also made some suggestions as to how we can address these different concerns that people have. So of those who had cited that they didn't get the vaccine because of a lack of awareness, after they had seen some of the most current booster guidelines, they had actually then answered that they did plan on getting the dose. So, a way to combat the fact that there was a lack of awareness around this vaccine, of course, I think you guys will say, duh, is to increase outreach through providers and through trusted messengers, and also to more heavily promote tools that give people accurate, like good vaccine guidance. For those who had sort of like this perception that they were not at risk of getting COVID or not at risk of getting really severe COVID, this group basically might have been overestimating their own protection. It was really interesting that almost 3/4 of them had either not experienced a COVID infection or had recently gotten a vaccine dose. So it kind of makes sense that they felt like they were still pretty protected against it. And some of the suggestions around this group of people is to sort of provide interactive tools that can help someone sort of get a personalized immunity estimates. And when I went onto the website for the CDC, I tried to look for what this tool might look like, and I didn't find it. So if any of you, have it, it might be nice for you to share. For the third group who, expressed some concerns and uncertainties around this, the bivalent booster shot. So this was one of the most cited reasons by those who were 60 or over, and it kind of makes sense that people who may have more vulnerable health might be the ones that may express the most concern about side effects and some uncertainty there. And so the suggestion for them was to increase awareness of the safety and effectiveness data available through either providers or public health messengers. And for the last group that I have created, which is those who either because of work do not have more time or it's too much effort, obviously I think, and many of you already do this, is just kind of increasing the accessibility of the vaccine and the ease by which people can obtain it. So, I gave you a lot of information to digest. I just want to again point out some of the limitations, kind of remind us of some of the, we just heard about some of the reasons why people were hesitant about against this vaccine. But, we cannot generalize these results to people who have not yet gotten any vaccinations. And that might be some of the people that you're targeting, but, we cannot generalize to them. Also, another limitation of this survey was that because most respondents were white and the respondents did not really, the proportions did not really match like national levels of the breakdowns of race and ethnicity, they were not able to weight the sample by race and ethnicity. And also we cannot use this result to kind of generalize how people in urban versus rural areas might be thinking about the bivalent booster shot. But something that you all know really well, and something that even the article points out, is that there are studies that have found that there are racial and ethnic disparities in COVID booster vaccinations. And there's certainly a difference in vaccine equity that differ among communities due to work obligations, transportation, or language barriers. And these were not except for the work one, transportation and language barriers were not even a reason that was made as an answer choice in the survey. So that's just something to note. So, for the next presentation, I plan on sharing with you all vaccine hesitancy that has been collected from the CDC Community's Wellness Survey. And I think this is going to be really relevant for everyone because it's the data that we have been collecting. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys next time. But I know that there's a planned breakout, and before then, if you have any questions, please let me know. Also feel free to refer to the slide deck that I have provided in the link